every villain archetype explained, including my favorite number 5, which never gets mentioned in these discussions. Number 1, the Tyrant. A tyrant is defined by one core idea. They wield power to oppress others. Their role in the story is not to confuse the hero or to challenge their worldview with complex ideology, but to create a clear, immediate conflict. They have power and they use it to dominate, control, and exploit the people around them. A perfect example is Firelord Ozai from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Ozai is not a complicated villain. He is not misunderstood, he is not secretly right, and he is not driven by some grand philosophical vision. The most complicated thing about him is how he gets these sick-ass golden armbands over his biceps. He wants power, and he wants to expand his empire at the expense of everyone else. His tyranny is visible from the war he wages to the way he treats his own family, and because of that, Aang's goal is crystal clear, with no room for debate. It is a moral imperative. Ozai must be stopped. Now, hearing this, you might think this sounds too simple or even boring, but simplicity is exactly what makes the Tyrant work. These characters are single-mindedly selfish, and everything they do flows from that desire. Because of that, the stakes are instantly understandable, and the audience doesn't need to decode anything. That means the story can focus on other elements. Returning to the Avatar example, Ozai being totally evil means that Aang's focus isn't on whether or not to fight him, but how to go about beating him. Does he deserve to die, or is there another way around it? And that is an important distinction. A tyrant isn't totally unreasonable. They can be defeated in multiple ways. They are still human and make human choices. They have desires, insecurities, and often an ego that needs to be constantly validated. Take Darth Vader from Star Wars. He operates exactly like a tyrant, enforcing the will of the Empire, crushing dissent, and using fear as a tool to maintain control. But what makes him compelling is that underneath that role, there is still a person. There are traces of Anakin Skywalker, buried under layers of anger and regret. That humanity doesn't make him less of a tyrant, and it's actually what leads to his defeat. Luke completing the Herculean feat of dodging daddy issues and managing to connect with him emotionally. And that's where the tyrant really shines in a story. While their actions are simple, their humanity gives you just enough depth to keep them from feeling hollow. You don't need to agree with them, and you're not supposed to, but you can understand why they are choosing this path, and that choice is enough to make them a compelling obstacle for the hero. Number 2, the monster. Unlike the tyrant, these villains are completely lacking in a human element that can be reasoned with or manipulated. The monster is defined by destruction, and for that reason it cannot be negotiated with or understood in the traditional sense. Its purpose in the story is to destroy that which is good, with no interest in compromise. Darth Vader could be brought back from the brink by the love of his son, but no argument or bargaining will convince a monster to stop their evil. This is how the Joker operates. A self-described agent of chaos, his insanity causes him to kill, maim, steal, and destroy all for the sake of it. You could give him a mountain of money or make him the mayor of Gotham. Nothing material or emotional will ever convince him to stop tossing children into trash compactors and tap dancing to their screams. And this makes him fascinating to watch because he's like an inhuman entity wearing a human skin. Any conflict with him feels primal, like facing a bear or a dragon, like a hero fighting a monster, or like you fighting those like and subscribe buttons, which you totally should, by the way. Other great examples include literal monsters, like the Xenomorph or Terminator, or Michael Myers. He doesn't have a grand plan, and he doesn't try to justify his actions. He doesn't even talk. He just shows up and he kills. That's all he does. And because of that, every scene he's in carries this overwhelming sense of dread. The tension comes from the tense inevitability of his action, like putting a bone in front of a dog, or a Crunchwrap Supreme in front of me. You know exactly what he's going to do next, no matter what it takes. And that is the primary function of the monster. It evokes pure, visceral fear, because it strips away the idea that problems can be solved through understanding. We like to believe that if we just think hard enough or talk long enough, we can resolve any conflict. The monster rejects that entirely. Sometimes there is nothing to understand. There is only something coming for you. Number 3, the mastermind. The mastermind operates through control of information. This is the antagonist who pulls the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating people, events, and entire systems to achieve their goal without ever needing to step into the spotlight themselves. Unlike the tyrant, they are not the strongest person in the room, be that physical, social, or any other kind of strength, but they are almost always the smartest, or at very least the most prepared. These kind of guys know how to divide by zero, or can guess what your girlfriend wants to eat on the first try. They are often manipulating multiple opposing forces at once, setting plans into motion that overlap and reinforce each other, crafting outcomes that feel almost inevitable. By the time the hero realizes what's happening, the board has already been set, and every move they make has been anticipated. Light Yagami from Death Note is the archetypical mastermind. Every action he takes is calculated, every risk is weighed against a potential outcome, and every mistake is followed by an immediate adjustment. What makes him so dangerous is his ability to think several steps ahead, constantly adapting his strategy to stay in control of the narrative. Like in his greatest gambit, where he willingly gave up his own memories of the Death Note, trusting that he set the dominoes up so perfectly that when his memories returned, he'd be perfectly poised to call checkmate. And he was right. And that leads into one of the defining traits of the mastermind: contingency plans. These characters rarely rely on a single path to victory. They build layers into their schemes, backup plans for their backup plans. Take Emperor Palpatine. His rise to power is not the result of one big move, but a long-term manipulation of both sides of an entire galactic war. He engineers the conflict, controls the political system, and positions himself as the only solution to the chaos that he creates. Even when things go wrong, they often still benefit him, because he's already accounted for those possibilities. Now, the mastermind and the tyrant can absolutely overlap. Some characters fill both roles. The Kingpin, Wilson Fisk from Daredevil, is a very effective mastermind, whose final goal is to live as a tyrant. He's both intelligent and physically dominating, making him an extremely effective opponent for our heroes to face off against. He's just as likely to take someone out by puppeteering an unfair criminal trial, or squishing your head between his bare hands. Number 4, the Zealot. Unlike the previous categories, the Zealot is not defined by what they do, but why they do it. A Zealot is fueled by ideology. They believe in something deeply and completely, and every action they take is in service of that belief. In their mind, they are not the villain of the story. They are the one trying to fix things. Now, that belief is almost always twisted in some way. The Zealot wants their version of a better world, and they are willing to go to extreme, often horrific lengths in order to achieve it. Their goal might sound noble on the surface: peace, equality, order, salvation, but the methods they use to get there reveal the truth of their moral fiber. They're willing to sacrifice anything and anyone if it means fulfilling their vision. Like, whoever decided we should get rid of plastic straws to save the turtles or whatever, and replace them with these awful paper ones that actually take longer to decompose and dissolve in my mouth and get in the way when I'm just trying to eat my Crunch Wrap in peace. My point is, they do evil while believing they're doing good. Consider Thanos. He claims that he's not trying to conquer the universe for personal pleasure like a tyrant, and he's not destroying things out of pure malice like a monster. He believes, genuinely, that wiping out half of all life will create balance and prevent suffering on a universal scale. And what makes him so interesting is that the story takes that belief seriously. It gives him the space to explain it, to act on it, and to nearly succeed. There are even moments where the audience is forced to sit with the uncomfortable question, what if he's not entirely wrong? There are whales in the Hudson River again. And that's the defining feature of the Zealot. They are often considered right, at least in part, by some of the audience. To stay in the MCU, take Eric Killmonger from Black Panther. Killmonger sees real injustice in the world and recognizes that Wakanda has the power to help oppressed people globally, but chooses not to. That critique resonates with viewers. It forces both the characters and the audience to confront an uncomfortable truth. But his solution, global domination through violence, killing millions or billions of innocents and trampling over his own culture to do so, That's what makes him a zealot instead of a hero. Zealots go to extreme lengths because backing down would mean admitting that their entire worldview is wrong. Number 5, the Dark God. This type is where we move beyond individuals entirely and into something much larger. A dark god is more of a force than a character, something systematic or inevitable, something that exists above any one person's choices. It represents an aspect of reality or society or existence itself, and because of that, it cannot be defeated in any traditional sense. Now, on the surface, this might sound similar to the monster, but the difference is fundamental. A monster can be slain. It might be difficult, you might have to pause the game and eat 46 apples to not die, but at the end of the day, monsters are still a thing you can kill. The Dark God is not like that. You cannot kill entropy. You cannot punch your way out of something that is baked into the structure of the world itself. Often, the Dark God is something conceptual, like war, or a literal force of nature, a hurricane, earthquake, tsunami. But there are some things that are less figurative gods, such as Galactus. He's not evil in the traditional sense, he doesn't hate humanity or act out of cruelty, he consumes planets because that is his function as a cosmic constant, a necessary part of the universe's balance. You can fight him, you can delay him, distract him, you might even drive him away, but you cannot end him, or even disprove him in any meaningful way. By the way, if you want to hear me talk more about Galactus and see what would happen if I pit him up against Superman, you should check out my Heroes vs. Villains series, where I take heroes from one universe and find villains from another that would make good matchups, like Thor vs. Darkseid, or the Hulk vs. Bowser, and explain how their clashes would go. You can see that whole playlist at the top of the description, but that's outside the scope of this video. And that's the defining trait of the Dark God. It exists beyond morality. These forces are not wrong in the same way a tyrant or a zealot is wrong. They simply are. Like an unstoppable plague or the collapse of a society under its own flaws. There's no single culprit to point at. The threat is the system itself, the natural conclusion of forces that have been set in motion long before the story even began. Because of that, defeating a dark god almost never looks like a traditional victory. You don't win by overpowering it or outsmarting it, but finding a workaround, by reframing the problem or by making a concession. Sometimes the solution is just to survive it. Oftentimes, it's to accept it without losing hope. A good way to think about it is this. When a story introduces a dark god, it's not asking, can the hero win? It's asking, what does winning even mean here? If the threat is something fundamental to existence, then victory becomes relative. You're not restoring the world to how it was before, because that was never an option to begin with. The sixth type of villain is the corruption. These characters exist to turn good things evil. It takes what is pure, stable, and heroic and twists it into something dangerous. You know exactly what I'm talking about if you've ever met my ex-wife. This influence can take a lot of different forms. Sometimes it's literal, like a plague, a curse, or an infection that spreads from person to person. The Venom symbiote from Marvel physically bonds with the user, eroding their sense of morality and heightening their animalistic aggression and ego. It takes what's already inside you and pushes it further, turning small flaws into defining traits, until the hero isn't acting very heroic anymore. Other times, the corruption is psychological. It preys on the temptations and weaknesses of the characters, offering them power, validation, or relief in exchange for just a small compromise. And then another, until suddenly, the person you were rooting for is no longer the same. The White Witch from the Chronicles of Narnia is a textbook corrupter, sensing the jealousy Edmund has for his siblings and preying on it, offering him sweets and the promise of being a prince if he just betrays them and brings them to her. And he does just that. Of course, that's the defining feature of the corruption. It requires participation. This type of villain offers something: power, control, pleasure, revenge, that it's totally normal to get lunch with your ex and that she just wants to talk. And it's usually targeted at where our hero is hurting most, so they're more inclined to accept the offer. If we return to Star Wars again, Can you tell I'm a little bit of a fan? Anakin doesn't fall to the dark side because he's evil. He falls because he's afraid of not being strong enough to protect the people he loves. And those fears are exactly what get exploited by Palpatine, slowly guiding him down a path where each decision feels justified in the moment, but catastrophic in hindsight. At its core, the corruption preys on the fragility of goodness. They show us that being a hero is not a permanent state, it's a constant choice that can be influenced, eroded, and eventually broken if the right pressure is applied. Which leads us to our final villain archetype. Number 7, the Fallen. A fallen villain is a former hero, or at least someone who could have been one. They are the result of tragedy, corruption, or injustice, a person who started on the right path and then somehow lost their way. Harvey Dent, Two-Face from The Dark Knight, begins as Gotham's White Knight, a symbol of justice and hope, someone who genuinely believes the system can work if the right people fight for it. But when that system fails him, when tragedy strips away everything he built his identity on, he breaks. His belief in fairness mutates into something hollow and mechanical, reduced to the flip of a coin. And it also makes him dress like Jordan Peterson for some reason. Another great example is Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. Eren starts as a protagonist driven by a desire for freedom, someone who wants to protect his people and destroy the inhuman Titan forces threatening their very existence. But as the story progresses, that desire grows more extreme, more absolute. His goal radicalizes. By the end, he's willing to commit unimaginable destruction, global genocide, in pursuit of that freedom. And what makes his arc so compelling is that it feels like a natural escalation of who he always was, a complete and total psycho. Fallen villains are compelling because we know what it was like to root for them at one point, and their betrayal feels personal to us, the viewers. But we can still see why they've become their modern, darker selves. You can trace the steps, see the moment things went wrong, the decision that changed everything, or the pressure that finally broke them. And because they were once the hero, we know exactly how effective they are, and we understand how incredible of a threat they pose to the hero. The reason evil Superman was so popular for a while is because everybody knows Superman is the top dog in DC. Nothing could be scarier than him going rogue. That leads into the core idea behind the Fallen. They are often the mirror image of the hero. They represent an alternate path, an answer to the question, what if things had gone differently? What if the hero made the wrong choice or gave in to their worst impulses? What if they didn't have their support system, the perspective, or the restraint to pull themselves back? The Loki to your Thor, the Obito to your Naruto, the Max to your HBO. Their impact in the story is felt twice as hard. Their atrocities sting even more because the hands committing them were once dedicated to protection, and because we know the hero will have to put them down now. Sometimes they can be redeemed, sometimes they can't, but either way, their existence forces the hero to look inward. Fallen villains exist to show us something very specific, that the line between hero and villain is not as wide as we like to believe. And by overcoming them, whether through saving them or stopping them, the hero proves that they can withstand not just external threats, but their own potential to fall as well. Stay frosty.